What is up? My name is Matt, working for Cinematography Database, and today we're going to be talking about a cinematography composition framework concept, whatever you want to call it, called zero tilt. And specifically, we're going to be looking at how to use this concept when you're choosing the camera height when you're framing up. Zero tilt can also be called the resting position or a neutral composition. And we're going to be looking at what that means using CineDesigner. Here is our scene. We have a nice, well, it's not even a nice, we have a blue sky, green grass, and what I want to call out right now from the very beginning is this line right here. Okay, that didn't work out. And we're back. You can't do that in Photoshop. It auto pans over, whatever. Where the ground meets the sky, this is the horizon. And a very important thing to keep track of while we're looking at the zero tilt concept. Also down here, we have a C300 on a Manfrotto tripod. I tried to keep this relatable. And we have our main talent. And that's what we're going to be looking at here. Very simple scene, simple exterior. I think we've all filmed something like this. Tripod, camera, talent, sky, grass, horizon. Let's move on. So now we're in profile of that same scene, and we have our talent and we have our camera here. And all zero tilt means is that we don't tilt the camera at all. It's perfectly flat and level. So in all these situations, the camera is going to have zero tilt. If you're using a geared head, it'll actually tell you how much tilt you have. And if you're on a fluid head, you're just gonna have to eyeball it. But in general, it means you keep the camera level, both horizon-wise and tilt-wise. It's very simple, but let me show you why this is important and why I call this the neutral or starting position for camera composition. So, what we'll see here is that if you take the lens here, if you draw a line to the talent, it's gonna intersect her right in the middle, pretty much at crotch level. And now what we wanna look at is essentially the height from the person to the ground right here. I'm going to draw a line. We're going to call that H, right? That height there. And what we're going to also look at is the height from the camera to the ground, like this. And right now, these H's are going to be the same. So let's look through the camera and start to understand why this is important to understand. If you look at the horizon right here, it is in the middle of the frame. It's in the middle of the composition. When you use zero tilt, the horizon will always be in the center of the frame vertically, meaning that this is going to be the same as this. These are the same distances. This is a very important concept to understand for composition, and this is what happens when you use zero tilt. But let's look at something else that's happening here. If you look in the middle of the frame as well, I immediately regret this example because the horizon, I put it right at her crotch level. That's kind of awkward, so I apologize. That was not intentional at all. Hopefully we can move through this example. If you look at the horizon, it's going to be intersecting her right at this crotch level here. And as we flip back to this shot, we'll see that this height here and this height are the same, and the center of this camera is going to also be at the crotch level. So basically, the height of the camera is going to be also the height of the center of the frame. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to draw the imaginary lines of the camera, and it's going to be rough. It's going to be something like that and something like that. So that's what the camera is seeing. So to recap, when we use zero tilt, the horizon is in the middle of the frame, and then also whatever is the same height as the camera is going to also be the middle of the frame. And so you guys know, all of my lights are currently in home studio number 2 in the basement, so I'm just working with window light. The sun's coming in and out. There's a lawnmower outside. It's a dirty mess. I apologize. Hopefully this does not distract from the content too much. So let's move on to another example of the zero tilt. We'll see that the camera here is again going to have zero tilt. Let me just draw the middle line here from the camera. And what we're going to expect here is that this height here, like I said right there, this H here is going to be the same height from here. So just looking at this with zero tilt, looking at the height of the camera, I can assume that the middle of the composition is going to be right here, right at her collarbone essentially. And look at that, if we draw the horizon in the frame again, right here, it is exactly in the middle. And the horizon is in the middle of the frame vertically. I believe this is pretty much the same camera height. It's a little bit higher. Yeah, it's a little bit higher as we draw the line here. And we're switching to 100 millimeters. So we can assume that right now, because this height is the same height as this, that the middle of this frame, because we're using zero tilt, is going to be basically right under her nose. So let's check that out. Here's the horizon in the background. It's a little bit blurry, a little bit harder to see. Horizon, again centered, middle of the frame is right under her nose. This is the zero tilt rule. This is the zero tilt concept. And I call this neutral framing because we're putting the horizon right in the center, and also because the camera height equals the middle of the frame. So right now on the left is the behind the scenes view, on the right is looking through the camera. And we are using a 100mm lens, and we are currently at 0 tilt. And if you look down here, we actually have the controls for the tilt right in Cine Designer. So I tilt up, I tilt down, and you see that there's numbers associated with those. Those are degrees. So this is about 15 degrees down, this is 15 degrees up, that sort of thing. But if we zero it out, again, you can see in Cinema 4D, it shows you where the horizon is. And that's one of the great things about this tool. So like I said, if on set you want to frame up a close-up, you typically want to start with 0 tilt and present this to the director. Now, the director might say, you know what, I want to be looking up at her a little bit, and let's look what changes when we do that. So I'm going to grab the actual tripod sticks here. So we've brought the camera physically down in position, and now we're going to tilt up, and look what happens to the horizon when we do that. So I'm going to start tilting up like this, framing her up, and we'll see that we have lost the horizon completely. We are now not at a neutral framing in my point of view. We are not at 0 tilt, we are tilting up. We've broken the 0 tilt concept, but that's fine. Like I said, the whole point is to start at 0 tilt so that you have a reference point, a jumping off point to talk to with people about going higher or lower or changing it. And just for illustration, let's go back to 0 tilt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the camera back up. So now I've moved the camera above the talent's eye line, but we're still at 0 tilt, and you can see that the horizon is still right in the middle of the frame. But let's tilt down and see what happens. Now again, we've lost the horizon, but the horizon has actually come above the frame, so we're shooting into the ground. This is a different look. Different products, different scenes are going to require this, but again, if you started with this framing, I think it's a little bit backwards. In most cases, I want to start the composition right at 0 tilt. I want to see the horizon, and then from there, with the director, typically, I make an educated decision. Do I want to bring the horizon higher, or do I want to bring the horizon lower, changing the tilt and changing the camera height? Boom, so that is the 0 tilt concept as it relates to camera height. When you're at 0 tilt, the horizon is in the middle, and the camera height is also the height that is going to be in the middle of the frame because you haven't tilted. This is what I call the resting position or neutral composition. This is where I usually start my composition when I'm framing up, and from there I can have a conversation with the director or whomever needs to be talking about composition. We talk about camera height from here. Do we go higher and tilt down? Do we go lower and tilt up? That's the concept. I hope that's helpful for you. If you liked this episode or you learned something new, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, damn it. We've got so much more coming. I'm still kind of evolving and figuring out some of this terminology, but in the end, I'm going to try to bring this all together into a book or into some sort of cohesive online course. But for now, I'm kind of just trying a lot of these concepts out with you guys on YouTube. I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you will come with me on this journey. I'm trying to give names and visuals to basically every piece of cinematography having to do with composition, movement, lighting, framing, everything. I think framing and composition is the same thing. I will see you guys on the next episode. You get out there, plan better, shoot better.